I'm here today with Kimberly Ann Johnson, who is the author of the early mothering classic, The Fourth Trimester, Healing Your Body, Balancing Your Emotions, and Restoring Your Vitality, which is published in 7 languages around the world. She is a sought-after practitioner and lead authority in postpartum health. Johnson has been working hands-on in integrative women's health and trauma recovery for more than a decade. After a very difficult postpartum experience, Kimberly devoted herself to her own healing and became a birth doula, a certified sexological birth worker, and a somatic experiencing practitioner. Together with her mentors, she founded the Stream School for Postpartum Care to train professionals to help women heal from painful sex, birth injuries, and genital trauma. Kimberly's work has been featured in the New York Times, Forbes, Vogue, New York Magazine's The Cut, Harper's Bazaar, Today.com, and many more. Welcome, Kimberly. I'm so glad to have you with us.
Thanks, Karina.
So I'd love to maybe begin just by starting with your own birth and postpartum experience and how that led you into the work that you're doing now.
I went to Brazil on a bit of a lark, and I got there on a Sunday, and I arrived on a beautiful, incredible island called Ilha Grande with 100 beaches and no cars. And every day a more beautiful Brazilian arrived to work where I was working. And then on Thursday, a guy rode up in a Hawaiian outrigger, and I turned around to the person behind me and said, "Who knows, maybe that's the father of my child." And within 2 months, I was pregnant.
Wow.
I had come back to the US not knowing that I was pregnant. And then after my first trimester, I went back to Brazil. So I was really diving headlong into a totally new relationship, new country, new language. I honestly don't know how I did it, because I did all my midwife visits in Portuguese, even though I went to Brazil only having some Latin from high school. Mm-hmm. And then I had the baby, and I prepared a lot for the birth, but I had no idea that there was anything special about after the birth. So I felt relatively prepared. I trusted my body. I was a yoga teacher and a body worker. I swam in the ocean every day while I was pregnant. I felt like I did all the right things. And I tore during labor for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
And what the material my midwife sutured me with, my body rejected it. And it was the first time they had used that material. So because of that, the healing process was really challenging. And then it just kind of snowballed. So I was in tons of pain. And then, of course, the stress of pain made breastfeeding hard. And then I was walking back and forth to the breastfeeding center. So then I got a prolapse. And it just sort of was a downhill spiral in a lot of ways for the early postpartum time. Plus, I was in another country. I didn't have any of my usual comforts, friends, family, food.
Right.
And I did recognize, though, people would say, "Oh, are you depressed?" And it was like, well, I would go online and I would search postpartum I would search like holistic postpartum care, because I could realize, yeah, I'm depressed, but who wouldn't be depressed if they were like pooping in their pants without knowing it, and in pain all the time, and didn't have, my daughter's father at the time, he was working nights. So he would come home and then sleep all day and then wake up for like 1 hour from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. and then go back to work. So I was pretty much alone all day. Yeah. And I just realized, well, this isn't just my personal problem. The problem is I have no idea where to find any information about how I can help myself. Mm-hmm. And that led me on a journey to understand, what is this period of time, and why does nobody talk about this? And why do I only find hundreds of thousands of postpartum depression entries validating it, saying, yes, this is real, but nothing about, well, here's all the circumstances that contribute to it, and here's what we could all do together. So It took me about 6.5 years to heal myself. I was told a year postpartum that I needed a full pelvic floor reconstruction, and I knew I didn't want surgery. Yeah. So I went on to learn the skills that I needed to help women in similar situations.
Wow. It's such an incredible story. And we so often we prepare ourselves for the birth experience, but we don't think, and that's what, an hour, or several hours or maybe a couple days of our lives if we have a long labor, and then motherhood is the rest of our lives, but we don't really prepare enough or talk enough about the postpartum in very real ways about what to expect and the kind of support you'll need. So
it makes a lot of sense because the birth itself is a big event, and it is something that requires a lot of things that most of us have never practiced.
sure.
So a first-time mom is mostly, that's what the concern is. And it's hard if it's almost like we're so out of touch with cultural care and community and tribal support that we think, oh, well, yeah, this person didn't prepare. But it's like, really right now, the way that we describe preparing is like, still the mother has to do all the work of like enlisting her family and enlisting her partner if she has one. And, organizing all these things that really the community, that would be a community function based on how we live in proximity, based on established traditions. But right now we're having to recreate all those things. And a lot of them have turned into paid functions rather than, what your neighbor used to just do for you because they knew that's what we needed to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how did you get into and maybe you can define for us what a certified sexologist, is that how you say it?
I'm a sexological body worker.
Sexological body worker, yeah.
Yeah. Sexological body work is a fairly new field of work that includes genitals and healing. So if you go to massage school, you're going to learn how to drape breasts and drape genitals so that you never touch them, and you make people very comfortable that that's never going to happen. Rolfing school, which I'm a Rolfer, structural integration. Sometimes because it was something that evolved in like the 60s, mostly people were used to women taking bras off. So, but everyone always has their underwear on. And when I had a baby, I all of a sudden realized, wow, this is insane that I've had every part of my body worked on, including my nose and my mouth, but I've never had any vaginal or anal work. It makes a lot of sense considering liability and all these things. But in terms of just a whole system, it makes no sense because there's structural pieces in the vagina that you can't reach anywhere else. And the vaginal tissue is much like mouth tissue where it's super pliable. So it's actually really good news because it's easy to do really great work in a short period of time, which pretty much all women should have post-birth. So sexological bodywork is the certification that I have that allows me to do that genital work because normally genital work, unless it's done by acupuncturist, doctor, physical therapist, is illegal to exchange for money because of sex laws. So that's where I did all the unshaming work, because if we're going to work in pelvises, like if you're a doula or if you are a body worker, if you're going to actually attend to the pelvis, there's so much shame that lives there in so many different ways. And I feel like sexological bodywork training, we didn't do lots of work on vulvas. The training itself is founded by Joseph Kramer, who's a gay man. And it started out that was really tons of anal work. And it still is, because the anus is kind of universal. No matter what gender you have, everyone has an anus and everyone calls it an anus. And so it's sort of like the universal place, and also a place that holds so much shame and taboo and messiness, but is also a gateway to a tremendous amount of downregulation, pleasure, relaxation. So there wasn't too much vulva work, but because I was actually, by the time I took that training, I was already working with women, because once I started talking about what was going on with me, people just started telling me their stories. Oh, my tailbone broke 3 years ago, or my tailbone's just been hurting for 3 years. And then I'd say, well, what happened 3 years ago? I had a baby. And so I'd like, okay, well, do you want me to work on you? And they'd be like, yeah. And then we would fix it. So I was already doing it, but it's the major piece of training that really helped me understand how many layers we're working with when we're working with the pelvis, and how integrated gynecological, pelvic, and sexual health is. Because if you work in the birth world, you don't really talk much about sex other than cursorily, and you don't really talk about trauma. And if you're in the trauma world, everything about sex is very deviant, negative, serious abuse focused. It's not really about the gray area that all of us live in and are navigating, that happens to be like a major part of our lives. And then if you're in the it's just like each one of those worlds isn't really talking to the other as much as they could be. And so that's where I decided to plant myself.
Yeah. It's such important work, especially with the overall disconnection between sexuality and motherhood. Like once you become a mom, you know, that disconnect and the sense of loss of maybe, you know, your identity as a sexual being once you become a mom. When do you start working with women postpartum? How soon after the birth?
That really depends. It depends on the kind of birth they have. To do hands-on work, I wouldn't do it before 4 to 6 weeks, probably.
Yeah.
For any kind of surgical birth, I wouldn't be touching or working with scar tissue until the scar was fully formed and healed. But I did co-fund a study with Kelly Garza of Steamy Chick called the Fourth Trimester Vaginal Steam Study.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so you can go there and look at the results, the longest URL known to man. And so that started steaming for vaginal birth 4 days postpartum. Our study was steaming from 4 to 9 days postpartum. You know, my whole book, The Fourth Trimester, is about like what you do during those 40 days and then what you do beyond. But as far as like actual manual work, and I also recommend, because now that people are starting to learn more about the sequela that can happen, like prolapse, a lot of people freak out at like 2 weeks postpartum and are like, I'm prolapsed. And it's like, well, no, you need to still just be resting in there. You don't even need to be evaluating where your organs are until you're fully through this rest period.
Right.
But what you were saying about sexuality, I feel that motherhood is like the greatest opportunity for sexuality because it really centers the feminine, and now penetration can't be the main event. So it's really like Laura Gutman, who wrote, the Argentinian analyst who wrote Maternity Coming Face to Face with Your Own Shadow. She called it the feminization of sex. So now female pleasure has to come to the forefront. And that's disarming because we live still in this patriarchal, and I don't like throwing that word around, but in this case, it's like we are still so identified our sexual selves with how we're pleasing the other. And even if you're not heterosexual, our sexuality is so influenced by the male arousal trajectory, by what is attractive to the other rather than what is intrinsically interesting to us.
Yeah.
And that's why it's challenging, because I mean, of course, if you're injured, it's also challenging. And if you had a tough birth experience, it's challenging. And it's not that it's not a challenge, but it's also like a call to maturation, right? It's like a call to like, okay, that's one form, that's one way, that's one sexual self, but like, what is the new sexual self? And it's not that there's not loss or grief or, but it is, I do believe that it is leading us in a direction of maturity in a good way.
Yeah. So there's an opportunity for expansion and in yourself as a sexual being, as a mother. And how do you connect new moms or any mom to this idea of kind of reclaiming or claiming in a new way their sexuality?
It really depends on the person, because people come out of it in all different ways. But I think that's the most important thing to know, is like, there's no right way to be. There's just the way that you are, and being really honest and present with how you are, which is hard because when you're coming out of the birth experience, you're still in a bit of this hormonal soup where, and especially if you had any anesthesia or what, we're in a global pandemic at this moment when we're talking, like, there's just so many things going on that it's hard to localize ourselves anyways. It's hard to like really feel. So the first step is just coming home to your own body. And there's a lot of ways to do that. I have a free meditation series called Healing from a Difficult Birth that's based on my work with Pam England and birth story medicine together with somatic experiencing. Because I really want that work to be widely available. I feel like most women need that after birth.
Yep.
And then steaming is a good somatic practice to come home. It feels good. It smells good. It's something that's just for yourself, in contact with your genitals. If you had, if you're still having some aversion to your pelvis, or, that's a good way to come back to yourself. In my book, I go take people through vulvar breathing. It would it would behoove us to think of this time as somatic recovery rather than, let's get everyone a therapist, like let's diagnose and then decide that it's a mental health problem. Because when we care for ourselves and we are cared for postpartum, we stay warm, we eat warm things, we stay contained, we're going to mitigate, and we have some accurate mirroring, we're going to mitigate more things down the road. And then I would just say, the Gottmans, the Gottman Institute said that the first year after having a baby, most women feel like their partner wants more sex. But if you ask the partner says they just want acknowledgement. So to the extent that you can stay in connection with your partner, let the partner know that they're still important to you and that this is an ongoing inquiry that you want to attend to, but you to verbalize it to the extent that you can. But that's hard if a woman doesn't feel taken care of, right? Like if she's essentially depleted and still maybe her partner is, out of town, all the variants that can be, or working out of the house, right? Then she's not going to have disposable energy. So I tell everyone, like, let your partner call me, because if they ever want to have sex again, they'll invest in the postpartum doula. Like it's not just an extravagant thing. It's like something that seems like a luxury, but it's actually a necessity. Yeah. And it's sometimes hard for people to understand that until they're going through it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure there's a wide range of experiences, but I'm curious from your work, what you've noticed as far as women's interest in sex in that first year postpartum, and then their feelings about themselves sexually.
Most of the people, if I'm going to generalize, most of my clients feel like they're worried because their partner wants sex and they're not really sure that they do. And so they're just like, well, my partner's really patient and super awesome, but I'm worried because I don't know when I'm going to want it again. I would say that's like the major thing, which is interesting because Robin Lim wrote a book in the early 90s it's a beautiful book, pretty similar to mine actually. And her take on it was that all of her clients, she was having to tell them to wait to have sex longer. Like they wanted to have sex at 3 weeks. Yeah. And so I don't know if that's just because she was really hanging out in a hippie community and with people who didn't work that much, or if it was just a different time when people were engaging. But many more people that I'm in contact with are like, it's been a year and we've had sex 2 times and it hurt, or I've had sex a bunch of times and it's hurt every time. And now I'm here because like, I just can't do that anymore. And the scripts that we have sexually in this culture are very limited. Number one, we think of sex as something that you do and something that people measure by the acts of them or the amount of time they take. So that if you say like, how's sex going for you? They're going to say like, well, we have sex twice a week and it's for like 20 minutes and we're both satisfied kind of thing.
Right. Kind of checking off all the boxes.
Yeah. And to them and a lot of people report that like proud, like we do it every week and it's, we both get off but we don't really have a script of like, well, what are you exploring? And like, what's interesting to you? And do you have any edges right now? And like, where are you in your fantasy world? Or what are you thinking about? What are you expressing? What we have postpartum, and everyone who's postpartum has probably said these things who's listening, because it's like, there's really just 3 things that we have women can say. One is I have low libido. The other is I'm touched out. Right. And the other is I'm exhausted. So we don't really know how to say, I kind of want sex, but I don't want the sex I've been offered to this point. And I have no idea how to construct something that I do want. Yeah. So I'm avoiding. Wow. Because the advances that my partner might be making, I know where that advance leads, or I think so. And I don't know how to pattern interrupt. I don't know how to say, yeah, I would like to like kiss or mess around, but I just don't want to end up in this place. And I don't want you to be disappointed, or I don't want you to think this. Mm-hmm. Or, a lot of women are still in a phase where they're judging themselves externally. So as they're making love, they're thinking about how they look, or the rolls of their stomach, or the breast milk that's leaking, or those things that are, it's hard to it's hard to marry the mother body with the sexual body, right? The classic Madonna whore. Like, can I be both of these things? And what does that mean? And, you know, who do my breasts belong to? Like, they did belong to me. They kind of belong to my partner. Now they belong to the baby. Right. And that kind of confusion, or can I differentiate between my baby's hands grabbing at me or my children and my partner touching me and wanting to make contact? So what I usually want women to ask ourselves is, how can we have sex that feels nourishing for us? So what would feel good? What would feel like it's replenishing you rather than being taken from you? Because that's just an old paradigm of like sex is something that women give and men take. Right. And so if you were to give yourself permission to say, no, I actually want to be sexual, I just don't really know how right now, what would you want that would feel like it was filling you up rather than taking? That's a really powerful question, because I think so often, I know in my own personal experience postpartum, and just the things that you've named, it's like, you know, low libido, exhaustion, touched out. So to ask yourself that question, it just gives you a whole new opportunity to create something entirely different. That to think of like sex as something that's replenishing. I mean, that's, you know, what it probably should be, but it, you know, you don't think about that when you're exhausted and all you can think about is getting some sleep. Right. And also thinking of the either or, you know, there's plenty of times when before we ever have children that we're willing to stay up all night, that we'll do anything for sex. I mean, most people, at least, you know, I was like, I'll be late for work. I'll do, like, I don't fucking care. Like, if this is good, this is what I'm doing. Yeah. And not that that's like an everyday solution, but to remember that that is a part of a possibility of what it is. And, you know, in my book, it's kind of interesting to me that I talk about it so much in my first book, because I didn't have a partner to do any of this work with. And I think maybe the lack of postpartum experience and the lack of the partner to do it with, and then hearing the stories of all the women that I worked with and like being like, oh my God, like if I had a man around who wanted to fuck me, I would just be so overjoyed. You know what I mean? Like, like just the opposite reflection of like, wow, you have somebody that even is like in your house. Right. You have access. Yeah. Like, and who seems like they're kind of game all the time. Like, to me, that was just like, you've got like this giant magical resource that I can't even imagine having. And, you know, I know that it's not that simple, but I have practices in my book, including one of them is called street cleaning. Street cleaning is when you literally, you say what's between you, right? So instead of, because I think the other thing is like, oh, well, the classic is usually one person wants more emotional closeness to have more sex, and the other one wants more sex to feel more emotional closeness. Yeah. And then you just get in a gridlock. But like, if you can have, it doesn't take much. It's like, if you can have 5 minutes of street cleaning, okay, I'm just going to talk for 5 minutes and you're going to listen. And then my time's over. And now you're going to talk for 5 minutes and I'm going to listen. And now my time's over. And then just see what happens. There doesn't have to be a foregone conclusion. But I think there's a real mistake that there, well, first of all, there's this thing that like, as women, we're supposed to, like, it's our job for guys not to get blue balls. And it's our job for, you know, to take care of the other person's orgasm, because it might even be painful and all those things. I'm not on the other side, which is like everyone for their own, everyone's in charge of their own orgasm. Because if you're in a relationship, to some extent, you're responsible for the other person's sexual satisfaction. Not 100%, not like, you know, but I mean, you do care about the other person and you do care that they feel fulfilled in some way. But if these little tiny practices that are really need to be daily, so that it's not like you're bridging like a huge gap when you try to come together intimately, that you're already a little bit near because you're already somewhat resonant. Yeah. And that you save some space for that, because it's not really good for the kids when all your attention is only on the kids, right? Your children also need to know that they are the cubs. They're not the, you know, they're not the mating pair. They're the cubs. Yeah. So to the extent that that connection is there, I find that, if we're talking in heterosexual dynamics, most men are very receptive and they're just waiting to be told what to do. They're just like, I'm here, I'm into it. And I don't want to hurt you. And I don't want to push you. I don't want to be a jerk. So I'm just kind of like wondering what will work. Right. And they're waiting for us to give them our code. And we got to find our own code, which for most people feels like a lot of work. And they're like, ugh, I got to do this too. Like I'm doing every other thing and I also have to do this. Yeah. But it's like so rewarding because when you do it, you actually get what you want and you create a whole other layer of intimacy and connection that you didn't really probably know was there. And most people, you can have frustration. I mean, you can have all the range of human emotions, but it's such a great metabolizer, like I'm always like, get out of therapy and get into your bedroom. Like just, and like, and that doesn't mean something happens there. It just means like be in contact with the person and find out what's going on. And that arousal energy, to whatever extent it takes shape, often is the thing that we need to like have the catharsis that we need, or, there's something else there that comes up.
Right. And that, sexual health and sexual satisfaction, talk a little bit about how that feeds into the rest of your life as a person and as a mother, because I think sometimes we just can't think, it just seems like so much energy to have sex and we don't think about like how great it is for us.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of pressure and I don't like I don't like if people interpret what I'm saying as pressure, because I'm not asking people to want something they don't want. Yeah. I'm asking them to find what they do want. Like never once has a woman come to my office, and many times they have come and said, I want you to help me like sex again, or I don't like getting eaten out anymore, and I want you to help me like that again. Never once have I been like, great, here's a project, we're going to make you like sex. No, It's like, let's listen to what's actually happening, which is often this person needs deep rest. They need some place to go on their own for a little while, even if it's the corner of my office, and have their space respected. Or there's some dynamic from the birth that happened with their partner that it's not resolved. They feel abandoned. They feel resentful. And there needs to be some completion in their own system, or potentially completion with the other person. So I'm not saying make yourself like something you don't like. I'm saying just get underneath those edges a little bit, because this postpartum time, we come up against this feeling of, I used to be able to do everything myself, right? And hyper independence is like so praised in our culture. Yeah. All of a sudden we're weak and we're vulnerable. And probably someone's hearing that like, no, that's not weak. That's strong. I'm breastfeeding. I just gave birth. Yeah, but there is a weakness. We're vulnerable.
There's a vulnerability.
Out in the wild, we would be hunted, right? Like that's why you're protected, because you are in a vulnerable place. Your body is still leaking liquids. Like this is a vulnerable space. We're so unused to that. It goes against everything about, I mean, for me, when the 45 minutes after I had a baby, I basically told my mom, like, this was all bullshit, this whole feminism thing. I don't know why anyone told me that we're anything like each other. It's a different species. I was like fully on Mars and Venus land. Like, I don't even know how I ever thought I could even compare, because there's nothing like. And I think that I sort of lost my train of thought, but I just want people to think about what it is that they do want and the thread that they do want to follow. Yeah. And to the softening of the edges of like, I'm a single mom. I've been a single mom since my daughter was 9 months old. I've had relationships come and go, but I've never had anyone move in or like anything long-term. And now I have a boyfriend. And when we met up the last time, I just could feel it was like inside of me, I have all these 90-degree edges, and they're built up because I've been taking care of myself and my daughter. And it's like, I've like shored myself up, and it's very hard for me to soften into that receptive space because I just haven't really had the opportunity or created the opportunity or whatever. And so I think that's the invitation of like, well, where could you receive instead of the touch being like you thinking someone's trying to take something from you.
Mm-hmm.
What if they're actually trying to give something to you?
Yeah.
And you could help them give you what you wanted more.
Yeah. Right. And that's that's a deep thing that mothers need to practice too. I feel like it's just being receptive to being receptive at all. We're in a mode of giving out all the time, and being able to receive support and being able to receive, touch in a way that is serving us, that's meeting our needs, that can definitely create a shift. Where can people find you, and maybe you can share a little bit about some of your programs?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm on Instagram at MAGA Mamas at the moment. Soon that name will change to my full name, which is Kimberly Ann Johnson.
Okay.
MAGA means sorceress in Portuguese, and it was something that my neighbors in Brazil called me. They called me the Maga do Corpo, the body sorceress. But then, of course, I chose the one word in every language all around the world that would somehow become a meme for the lack of leadership. So anyway, new name, new podcast,
Wow,
I have a
okay.
podcast.
Yeah.
The podcast is getting renamed. It's probably going to be Activate Your Inner Jaguar. You can find me online at magamama.com or at kimberlyannjohnson.com.
Okay.
And yeah, I have a variety of different offerings that are either, like right now I'm teaching a class called Mother Jaguar, which is about defining our own boundaries, differentiation in a somatic way, and how we become the jaguar. So how we are the alpha in our relationship with our children, and they're not dominating us, and that we are actually dominating them. However much we don't like the word dominate, that they actually need that from us to feel safe and to know they're taken care of and protected. And that class also has a component of the erotic in what we've been talking about. And then my signature class is called Activating Your Inner Jaguar, which is nervous system work that's based on the work that I did with 800 women in session, and figuring out that there was an underlying theme that most women identify with the prey role in the nervous system, which is the freeze or the flight. Okay. And especially, it's more acceptable, especially as white women, to go into sadness, worry, panic, or collapse. And for most men, it's more acceptable for them to go towards fight response, which is an anger response, the predator response. And the new book, which is called Call of the Wild, which comes out April 13th, that's an extension of this work that I've been doing now for about 5 years, which is how do we occupy healthy aggression, power, and drive to repair those earlier flight and freeze responses. So in birth, what were you not able to say, not able to do, ways you couldn't move, in your past gynecological experiences, sexual experiences, and sometimes just other experiences that imprinted in our system and doesn't allow us to have full access to that wild animal energy, which is primal energy, which is life force, which is sexual energy.
Yes. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. And before we close, is there anything else you want to say to our audience, which is all mothers?
Yes. So what we're hearing about mothers is changed a lot, even in 3 years since my first book came out. Now maternal leave and family leave is something politicians discuss. Even this month, there was a stimulus plan that was proposed specifically for mothers. So there is a way that mothering is becoming more centered, is becoming something that is included in feminism, that's included in our reproductive rights, right? Because when we think reproductive rights, we think about our right to terminate a pregnancy, or we don't think about the rights of people who decide to have babies and how we care for them. And even so, we still live in a culture that does not value that which we cannot see. And our reproductive anatomy is largely not able to be seen unless we use a mirror. a lot of what we know comes from an unseen source.
Yeah.
So we have to value that in ourselves and in each other until the structures change. And I just want women to know that it's not a you problem. It's not an I problem. It's a we problem.
Yeah.
And that instead of thinking I'm probably the only one that feels this way, if you can flip that and say, I bet a lot of other people feel this too.
Yeah.
That's a totally different sensation in your nervous system. And it's what you're providing, Karina, through this conference is we need to horizontally mirror one another, give each other space to be seen. You know, right now, if we are seen, we're only seen for part of our faces, and we can't be together with one another. And we are mammals, and that is our natural proclivity would be to be close in proximity with touch. So if you're feeling like this is super freaking hard, you're right. It is hard. It's a miracle that all of us are even showing up to be here. Like it's taking so much to even just show up for the regular tasks, let alone stretch into this new archetype of woman that's never been before. Yeah. We've never been in the place we are now where we're not just trying to imitate the masculine and enter into the workforce and all that. We realize, okay, that's got a toll on our body. Now we're like, okay, now we're paying attention to our bodies, and it's just stretching all of the things. And men are not having to stretch like this.
Yeah.
Because it's not coming through their bodies. And even if you're listening thinking, oh, well, that's really binary. Well, if you look at how even the shape of gender is taking shape, it's all about what is a woman. It's not about what is a man. Like you don't spell it MXN, you spell it WOMXN. Right. So that's still getting played out in the territory of women's bodies. And that takes a toll. It takes it. And so instead of internalizing it and feeling like there's something wrong with you and you should be doing better, you shouldn't be as tired and you should be doing more. It's like, no, we're shoring up, and in our bodies is showing up the ways that the culture has really fragmented over the last 100 years, not even just in the last year.
Right.
So I just want women to know that you're not doing something wrong if it's challenging, right? You're not doing something wrong if your birth didn't go the way that you thought it should. I mean, the number of doulas that I work with who had births that were so traumatizing to them, and it's almost worse for them because they were a doula and they knew all the things, is like, because we're mammals. And so we like people, I live in San Diego, and compared to LA or New York, where I have been during the pandemic, it's way chiller. But you can't get away from the fact that we're animals, and like any animal, you can sense danger. And the fact that all the other animals around, even if I don't watch the news and I don't take in all of the garbage, everyone around me is in that fear state, right? So we perceive that. So that's an extra level of stress that we're managing. And I also want women to know how much power we have. Like it might not be structural power all the time, but we have a lot of power, and we have even more than we think that we have. And so that's really what my work is about, is like, to the extent to which you have it, let's use it and let's mobilize it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being with us and for your work in the world. It's so needed, and we're blessed to have you.
Thank you.